Hello guys, welcome to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. Welcome if you're a first-time listener. Welcome back if you're an OG listener. I am here today doing a solo episode. I've done a fair few episodes, like bulk recorded through Feb. So I've done a fair few with Shaq. I did a couple with my mum. I've done a couple of solos. So they're all coming out at different times. So last week's was an episode with my mum about, we did the episode, 2 weeks before that with mum's gaining phase and her goals and all of those things heading into her 60th, which is just really cool. But then we did an episode last week where mum and I spoke about my own personal muscle gaining phase, which I am going into in April. Obviously, if you're an OG listener, you would have listened to that one. If not, definitely go back and have a listen if that's something that interests you. And I think it's cool because you might hear that and think, no, muscle gain phase, that doesn't interest me. And then when you hear what I'm going to talk about today, you might be like, oh, actually, it does. So just keep that in your mind if you haven't listened to that one. Off the back of this one, they could actually be quite cool to pair together. What I'm going to talk about today, guys, is the concept of toning. And if you're an OG listener, you will know that I've done this episode before, but it has literally been a year, and I thought it's going to be cool to revisit it. Obviously, if we've got new listeners, it'll be cool for them, but even for my OG gals, obviously every time we talk about things, we might have new ways of speaking about it or new examples, etc. Or I say this often, but sometimes when I talk about things, if you're at a certain stage in your journey, you might not take it all in, or you might not understand it, you might not really hear what I'm saying. And then when we revisit it a year later, you might be like, oh my God, that makes so much more sense to me now. So there's probably going to be some crossover between that episode I did a year ago and the episode I'm doing right now. So you might hear some things you've heard before, but I think this is a super interesting topic. I think this is something that obviously a lot of people want to work towards and have that goal of toning or looking toned, toning up, being toned, whatever we want to call it. And I think it's so important to really understand what that actually means. And I reckon that's the first thing everybody should stop and clock for a second is just, do I actually know what that means, and more importantly, how to achieve it? Because I think it's a very loose term where people go, oh my God, I'd love to be toned. And then it's like, well, what does this actually mean? And more importantly, like I said, how do we actually achieve a toned physique? And I think that if you don't know, you might be a little bit shocked with the actual explanation that I give today. So this is even just a cool thing, I think, for people to tap in, because this can really, it's one of those things that can help you kind of understand where you're at in your journey. And I don't mean any shame, or I don't want to put people in boxes with this, but if you're someone who hears all this and is like, oh yeah, I knew that, that's just a cool little reflection that you're actually really starting to understand everything that I'm saying and teaching and that you're hearing every week, which is very cool. I think it's just one of those things where you can be like, oh, I actually get this now. And that's just a cool reflection that you have learnt a lot and you're really progressing through your nutrition and training. So that is cool. And then obviously if you hear this today and think, oh my God, mind blown, I didn't know so much of this stuff, that's still awesome, because obviously it means you're learning and you're gaining new skills and new info, and then you can obviously implement them to actually achieve things that you want to, like toning, which is exactly what we are going to talk about today. So one of the very first things I said was that I'm going to talk about the, quote, concept of toning. And the reason I say concept of toning is because I think people think that toning is an action, as in I am going to the gym and doing things for toning. I'm going and doing toning exercises. And if you hear that and if you do think that, again, no shame, because it makes a lot of sense. If you're like, oh, well, I want to be toned, I will do things for toning. That obviously makes sense. But what we really want to understand is toning is not an action. It's not something that we can go and do. Toning is literally a look, or to be toned is literally just a look. And what that look is, and I'm going to explain this a lot more, but what that look is literally having enough muscle mass on the frame and then a low enough body fat percentage on top of that muscle mass to actually reveal it. So that is the number one thing. If you take nothing else from this episode, really take that and understand the fact that a toned body, or anything on the body being toned, whether it's legs, stomach, arms, anything at all, when something appears toned, that is simply that there's a bit of muscle there. Maybe it's a lot, maybe it's a little bit. It'll be different from everybody, but there's a bit of muscle mass there. And then there's a low enough body fat level sitting on top of that muscle that it appears toned. So then when we think about that, how we achieve something becoming toned or looking toned is literally through building muscle and dropping body fat. And if you're an OG listener or you're a follower on Instagram or any of these things, you'll know that I speak so much about the muscle gain phase and the fat loss phase. Me personally doing muscle gain phases and fat loss phases, but then running programs like that in Eat Like Ruby. And this is literally why most people, again, I don't want to put people in boxes, but most people and most females that come to me have goals to drop a bit of body fat, appear more toned, or build a certain body part. Maybe you want to build like a little bit more muscle in the legs or the glutes or the shoulders or something like that. And when we think about those things, having the muscle gain phase and having the fat loss phase is the most optimal way to work towards these things. If we then bring it back to that point that I just said, a toned physique has a bit of muscle and a low enough body fat percentage, we want to work on both of those things. That's something to take away as well. Toning or achieving a toned physique is a two-parter. Like there's two things that contribute to that, being the muscle gain and the fat loss. And we've spoken about this so much on the podcast over the months and over the last year, but I feel like we haven't touched on it a lot lately. When we think about that, so many people have the goal to be toned, yet they spend a huge amount of time focusing purely on the fat loss. If we think about the fact that a toned physique needs muscle gain and fat loss, but someone spends majority, if not all of their time focusing on fat loss, you're literally leaving out half of the equation. And that's why I get so passionate about a muscle gaining phase. And that's why I do so many of them myself. And in all honesty, as a bit of a side note, people say to me all the time, like, how did you get such toned legs? Like, how do your legs look like that? Always questions like, I always get questions like that. And it purely comes down to this, spending time actually building the legs and then going into a fat loss phase, dropping body fat off those legs, revealing a, quote, toned leg. So often it's so common for people to focus all of their attention and all of their time on a fat loss phase. And then this is where we can see people really spin their wheels. And I've spoken about this a long time ago, but if we're constantly just in low calories or attempting low calories, but kind of falling off track with those, whatever, whether you're hitting them or not, we're not spending any time optimizing muscle gain. And again, we think about the fact that a toned physique needs muscle on it and we need to gain that muscle at some point. Again, we've literally left out half of the equation. And that's where we spin our wheels, because if we think about always hanging around on low calories, often, and I reckon this is an important thing for people to clock as well, if you're someone who's always been very focused on fat loss, low calories, being light, I'm going to talk about the scale a little bit in a second, but if you really dedicate all of your time and energy and attention to that, it can be so common to spend a lot of time and energy on your diet, spend a lot of time and energy on your training, feel like you do that for months, if not years, and actually kind of stand still in terms of results. And I think that's very important for a person to tap in and think, shit, is that me? Do I actually put a lot of time and energy into my nutrition and training, and I'm not really progressing and really making changes to my physique? And obviously, if you don't want to make changes to your physique, then that's fine. Keep doing what you're doing. But if you're someone who has thought, I would love to build a certain body part or I would love to tone up, have you actually disregarded a massive piece of that puzzle, being the muscle gain in that building phase, to actually optimize that goal and that look that you're going for? So another little thing to point out here, and it's going to tie in well with what I just said, is often, like I said at the start, people can think that they're going to the gym or they're doing something particular with their nutrition and training to work on toning. And we see this often in the form of doing particular exercises to, quote, tone up a body part. If we think about doing this for our stomach, let's use that as a really perfect example because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Often we can think, okay, I want a toned stomach, or I want my stomach to tone up. I'm going to go to the gym and do ab exercises or stomach exercises. If we really think about the educational piece that I just said with toning being muscle gain and fat loss, often people can have excess body fat on the stomach and think that by going to the gym and doing ab exercises like sit-ups, crunches, leg raises, anything like that, we are turning the fat on the stomach into a toned stomach. This is not the case, and this is so important to understand. When we go into the gym and work a body part, like the abs in this example, we are building strength and muscle mass in that body part. So we are building that muscle to be a little bit stronger and be a little bit bigger. If there's excess body fat sitting on top of that muscle, we're never going to reveal it and it's never going to appear more toned. So again, piece it all together. I'm going to say it a million times. If we do go into the gym and do those exercises, we build the abs a little bit, then we actually reduce the body fat that's sitting on top of those abs. This is how we reveal a more toned stomach. So when we think about those particular exercises, they're not toning the stomach, and like I said before, they are not turning the fat on the stomach into muscle or into a toned stomach or burning that fat. When we think about fat loss, we've spoken about this so much. We know that fat loss comes from energy balance and creating an energy deficit, aka a calorie deficit. So if we look at this, we can work the stomach in the gym, like we can work the stomach muscles and the abs in the gym by building them, but then to drop the body fat actually has nothing to do with working on those particular muscles. It has everything to do with creating the energy balance and the calorie deficit to drop enough body fat to reveal that. If you don't understand that concept, I would definitely go back and listen to any episodes with the word fat loss in the title, because in all of those episodes, I always try and sort of break down how fat loss is actually achieved so people can really understand that. But go back and listen to those if you don't get it. If you do get it and you feel like you're starting to understand that concept of fat loss, the role that this plays in toning is that we're over here building the muscles during training and with certain exercises, and then the fat loss is the second part, comes in and we drop the body fat percentage to reveal that muscle. So I really hope that made sense. And the number one thing to really just take from that, if you don't take anything else, is understanding that doing an exercise on a particular body part is not going to tone that body part by removing the fat off of it. It's going to build the muscle a little bit, and then we need the energy balance through nutrition and calories burnt, all of those things, to drop the body fat, reveal that muscle, and therefore we achieve the look of being toned. And that really brings me back to that first point of toning being a look, not an action. Because if we think about that, we're not going into the gym and being like, okay, train this way to achieve tone. We're going into the gym to build muscle and build strength. We're then achieving fat loss through our nutrition and training and calories burnt and all those things that I just said. And then piecing that together creates the toned look. So toning is a look, not an action. And it's funny because with the previous episode I did about toning, full disclosure, I actually listened to it this morning. So this morning when I was doing my steps, I was like, oh, I'm going to listen to the last episode we did about toning from last year and just see what I spoke about. Would I talk about anything different? Is there anything that I would say again? Like just see what was actually in that episode. And one thing I mentioned in there, which is so worth mentioning here as well, is often people can have this idea that they want to, like, quote, tone up something like an inner thigh or the back of the arms or something like that. As a little bit of a side note, before I go into this example, we've mentioned this in different ways on the podcast before. We cannot choose where we drop body fat from. When we think about how body fat is achieved, it is achieved through a calorie deficit or an energy deficit. When we have less calories or energy coming into the body than the body needs, the body pulls excess energy out of storage. Body fat is stored energy. I love how I say I'm not going to explain this and now I'm explaining it. Body fat is stored energy, and our body is looking for extra energy to get through the day because we haven't given it enough with our nutrition. It pulls energy out of storage, aka body fat, and then our body fat goes down. If we think about that process happening, there's literally no way we can intercept that and go, hey, can you please pull it off my thighs? Hey, can you please pull it off my arms? Get it from my stomach. If we could, like, dream come true. If we could just pick and choose where we dropped it and gained it. When we think about building muscle, we can obviously pick body parts and focus on them and hone in on that specific body part. Meaning if we said, like, I want to build my hammies, we can pump a bunch of hammy exercises and build the hamstrings. We can't then turn around and say, okay, now I want to drop all the body fat off those hamstrings or off those thighs. So when I go into my deficit, body, can you please pull that fat from my legs only? We know that's not a thing. We know it doesn't work like that. So it's really important to understand that, yes, we can build a certain muscle, but we can't then choose where the body fat will come from. But if we think about that, I know I'm still in my side note, but I'm just going to keep going further and further into this side note. If we think about that, this is where the muscle gain phase and then the fat loss phase can be so effective, because when we go into a muscle gain phase, we can really hone in on a body part and think, okay, I really want to build my glutes or my shoulders, my hamstrings, my quads, my abs, whatever it is. If we know there's a certain body part that we want to build, or we want to have appear more toned or more lean on the other side of the gaining phase and the fat loss phase, we can give that body part extra attention and extra energy when we're doing the training during the muscle gaining phase. So if we've done that and we've really honed in on that one body part, then obviously when we go through this whole process, that body part is going to be a little bit more built or toned, whatever, on the other side. So massive side note, but just important to understand that. And if we've done that during a muscle gain phase, and then we do go through a fat loss phase and we drop body fat off the body in general and the body as a whole, obviously when we do a muscle gaining phase or we're training through that phase, we're working on the whole body. Yes, we might have gone hard on a particular body part, but we're still going to be working on most of the body, unless there's something we actually specifically want to leave out. But usually we're building a well-balanced physique is really what we're aiming for, with maybe a focus on something in particular. If we then go into that fat loss phase, we strip back body fat off of the whole body as that fat loss process occurs. We then come out the other side of these phases with an overall lean, toned physique. That is literally how a toned physique is built. And I feel like my mind wants to go in so many directions, but I already know that I'm deep in my side note. So I'm going to pull myself out of the side note and keep going with what I was saying. But what I was saying there is, it's common for people to think, I want to tone up a certain body part, like the inner thigh, back of the arm, all of those random little things, like I was saying. If we really think about everything I've just said, that toning is a built muscle and then a low body fat percent on that muscle. If we think about toning the inner thigh, no one really wants to build a big inner thigh muscle when we think about that. And if we know that that's how toning is achieved, that's not really what we're going for. If you're someone who is looking at certain body parts like the inner thigh, the back of the arm, etc., and thinking, oh, I'd love to, quote, tone this up, really that just means we want to drop some body fat off that body part so it's a bit leaner. And then we have to ask, do I want there to be muscle mass under that? And maybe we do, maybe we don't. If we think about something like the glutes or the hamstrings, like the back of the thighs, most people do think, yeah, I'd love to drop a little bit of body fat there and then have a nice little bit of muscle and it appears really toned. If we think about something like the inner thigh, like I said, our inner thigh muscle is actually our adductor. If you were to Google, I said this in the last episode, but if you were to Google like bodybuilder adductor, most people probably aren't going for that look. A big booming muscle pumping out of the groin, basically, is not actually the look most of us are going for. So we really want to understand that if we're nitpicking certain body parts, usually that just means that we have an overall fat loss goal that we want to implement at some point. And then you want to ask yourself, okay, if I do want to drop body fat, are there certain body parts that I would love to be a bit more built and lean, toned, etc., whatever we want to call it, underneath when I do so? And there's two more little things I want to speak to before I wrap up the toning convo. One of them is, often people can sort of hear, like I said at the start, if people heard me saying like, I'm doing a muscle gain phase, whatever, often people's minds can go, oh my God, I don't want to gain muscle, I don't want to be jacked, I don't want to be a bodybuilder, etc. If we think about, first of all, myself, but then also think about a lot of like, quote, fitspos, if you follow people online, if you follow certain accounts or whatever, there's so many females out there that are really lifting weights, really putting on muscle and rocking like a lean, quote, toned physique. If you look at so many Fitspo accounts, I'm trying to think of names. If we think about people like Lauren Simpson, Rachel Dillon, I know Lauren Simpson's pregnant, but like a lot of people probably know who that is, or if you don't, you could look her up. Most people have seen a lot of these girls' content and their videos and everything over the years. They've been lifting fucking heavy weights for years. I've been lifting heavy weights for years and really building that base and that bit of muscle mass so that when we drop body fat, we are toned. No one, like it's very rare for a female to just be huge and jacked and really stack on the muscle. So I think there's a big disconnect there when we hear the term muscle gain. People think, oh my God, I don't want to be huge. I've been lifting weights for years. I'm not huge. I'm literally 60 kilos. if we think about, again, so many female like Fitspos out there that a lot of us follow, no one is huge. Most of them are huge, I mean, in terms of body. Like, no one has a massive, huge, like, bodybuilder body. Most of them are very lean, very toned, very tight, which is the look that so many people are actually going for. And often people aren't piecing together that that physique is really built through heavy weights and muscle gain. And that's probably another little side note, here she goes, but often people can think that to achieve a toned physique is going to the gym and lifting like super light weights, baby weights, things like that. Again, really piece together and think, hang on, the physiques that I'm looking at and the bodies that I'm loving and wanting to work towards, etc., are they in the gym with pink 2 kilo dumbbells? No, they are not. No one is. Like, how it's so rare. I don't feel like we ever even see that anymore. Maybe I'm just following the right stuff. But I think there was a big sort of belief years ago where it was like light weights for toning. No one's in the gym actively lifting light weights. And even if we think about a lot of the episodes I've done towards the back end of last year about the actual point and the process of training and what we're going through with training, we know we want to push the body pretty hard. We want to push the muscles pretty hard, break down the muscle fiber, go through the recovery process, etc. You're not going to do that. And when we think about that process, the point of that is to stimulate to then adapt. You want to stimulate the muscles to work hard so that they adapt. If you are in the gym with pink 2 kilo dumbbells, and if they're heavy for you, then awesome, go off. But I reckon most people listening are past that point. If you're in the gym lifting light weights, you're not stimulating anything, and then you're not prompting the body to adapt and build and grow and do all these things that we want to do, because it's fucking easy. The point of training is that it's hard and you push the muscles and you push the body to a point where it actually is, like I said, stimulated. It thinks, shit, fuck, that was heavy. If she asked me to do that again, I need to be bigger, better, stronger, etc. Cue the muscle gain and the strength gain process. We continue going through that. We build that bit of muscle, and that is literally the muscle that we need when we drop the body fat to reveal a toned body. So if we bring it back and think about someone standing in the gym lifting really light weights, you're not prompting any of those responses. You're not triggering that process in the body at all. If you go to the gym and you just curl super light weights and you put them down and you walk out, you haven't done anything. It really is very much a waste. And that even brings me back to that, one of those first initial points that I said, where often people can do this and they're also spinning their wheels on low calories for ages. You turn around after 6 months, 12 months, whatever, and you think, fuck, my physique actually looks exactly the same. And really what's happening there, if you feel like you're hitting the gym all the time and you're dieting all the time and your physique looks exactly the same and you're not building any body parts that you want to, or you're not toning or progressing or anything like that, it's because you are not providing your body with the stimulus to warrant adaptation to then actually adapt and grow. If we think about adaptation, it is growth. If we think about a toned physique needing muscle growth, we want to trigger that process. I really hope all of that tied in and made sense for everybody. But this is where I think a lot of people come undone with wanting to achieve a toned physique, because they think, oh my God, I don't want to do a muscle gain phase because I don't want to get big, when we know that that's really actually very fucking hard for a female to get big. And if we are in the gym for a few months, really pushing big weights, focusing on strength, focusing on heavy lifts, all of those things, and putting the nutrition in place to back that up, we are actually going to trigger that stimulus and that adaptation response, make some muscle gain progress. And then if we do go into a fat loss phase after that, we can drop some of that body fat, reveal some of that muscle we've built. And here is our toned physique that we've actually been chasing for years. And the other little thing to point out here, guys, is we don't have to do a fat loss phase after a muscle gain phase. Most people want to, and that's totally fine. I usually do that. We run that in Eat Like Ruby. It can make a lot of sense. When we do a muscle gain phase, I spoke about this a bit last week with my mum, so definitely go back and listen to that if you want some more info. But if we do a muscle gain phase and we push into an actual calorie surplus, we have excess calories coming in. If we're ticking the boxes and doing all of the things to put those calories towards muscle growth, and we're training hard and we're doing all the things, that's awesome. But usually there is a little bit of body fat accumulation that comes with that. Like I said last week, we can minimize that. We can monitor everything. like it doesn't have to be a quote bad thing, but often there is still a little bit. We can go through a few months of muscle gain and think, okay, yep, cool, I've definitely progressed with strength. I'm feeling a bit bigger in a good way, but maybe a little bit in a bad way as well. If I've packed on some muscle, but I've also packed on a little bit of body fat, I'm probably feeling a little iffy. And then cue the fat loss phase, like I said at the very start, to strip that back and reveal that muscle. So that's usually why we team those things together, but we definitely don't have to. If you go into like a performance phase, which is usually like maintenance, I like to use the word performance instead of maintenance, because maintenance can kind of give this mentality that we're standing still. If we're maintaining, we're standing still. I don't like that. I like to use the word performance. So if we think about a person eating at maintenance or eating their maintenance calories, but really focusing on performance, they're going to progress with a lot of these things as well. Or if we do go into that actual calorie surplus and we're eating a bit more than the body needs and we're slowly packing on a little bit of muscle, etc., you don't have to do a fat loss phase after that. You can settle into that phase, whether it's maintenance, performance, calorie surplus, gaining, whatever. And if you find a sweet spot where you're just literally building the physique that you want, that is fucking awesome. Stay there as long as you want. Literally stay there as long as you want. And like I said in those recent episodes, I've done that for 9 months in the past. And that's probably one final thing I want to speak to, or there actually is 2 final things I want to speak to, but with muscle gain, it can be quite a slow process. So it's not something that we want to do for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks. With the Eat Like Ruby gaining phase, we are running that for 18 weeks, which is about 4 to 5 months, which can be a really good time to get after it and make some of those gains. People will often ask me like, oh, is that long enough? When we think about that, really it's just like the longer the better. If you went into a gaining phase for 3 years, obviously you're going to put on muscle, like more muscle than you would in 3 months. So you can just ask yourself, like, actually, how long do I want to focus on this thing and be in this thing for? But to me, I like the idea of that 4 to 5 month thing. If you get to the end of that and think, I'm fucking loving this, I'm going to keep it going, amen, go off, keep it going. But I think that's a really cool time to really dedicate to that. And then you can assess at the end, okay, cool, have I kind of packed on a bit in both ways? Would I love to do a bit of fat loss now heading into summer? If so, awesome. Or like I said, if you're like, fuck, I love the gains, I love this is awesome, I'm going to keep this going, that's perfect too. So there's absolutely no right or wrong way about how we have to navigate that. I just think it can be cool to line those things up if you're feeling that way and you do want to drop a bit of body fat on the other side of the gaining phase. The last little thing I'm going to speak to you guys is our good friend, the scale. We've spoken about the scale so much. I feel like I talk about this all day, every day. But something to really think about here with the toning convo is when we have a goal to be more toned, that is a look, like I said, and that look is muscle mass on the frame and low body fat percent on the muscle. That has absolutely fucking nothing to do with how much you weigh. If you are going through the process of wanting to build a lean or toned physique, knowing now that that requires additional muscle mass on the frame, fuck the scale. Your goal is to not weigh a certain number anymore. The scale is now very minor, if not very irrelevant in this situation. You are wanting to build a physique, and that really comes down to, like I said, putting muscle on that frame and watching that physique grow and watching that physique build. The scale is not going to tell you if you are building muscle or putting on body fat, like looking at the physique will. If we think about that, if you are wanting to put on muscle, you want the scale to go up. You want to see that number higher. This is where we see a massive cock block, because people will say, I want to build a physique, I want to be more toned, all of the things we've just spoken about. Anytime they see the scale go up, they freak out, they drop calories, they want to go back down. You're literally intercepting and cock blocking, progressing towards that actual goal that you have. So it's so important to really clock if you're at this point where you're wanting to go into a gaining phase or really work on your actual physique in terms of the look and the leanness and how toned it is, etc. The scale means nothing in that equation. So you really have to ask yourself, is my goal to weigh a certain number, or is my goal to look a certain way? And we talk about this with fat loss as well. This is not just for the toning thing, because if the goal is fat loss, again, your goal is to look and feel a certain way, not to weigh a certain number. But obviously when we're in a fat loss phase, the scale can be part of the assessment method to ensure that things are trending in the right direction. It's still somewhat of a middleman. I feel like I'm going to go off on a massive tangent about the scale. But in the fat loss phase, or in a fat loss phase, it can be a useful part of the assessment method. One useful part of the assessment method, not the whole fucking assessment method. But when we're wanting to go into a gaining phase and build a toned physique and all of the things, it's not a very useful part of the assessment method at all, because it doesn't really tell us if the actual physique is progressing the way that we want. So very important to think about. I think that last little thing that I've pointed out there with the scale and going into a gaining phase and all of that is a little bit more for the advanced girls, the girls that do want to dabble in gaining phases. I've said this in recent episodes. Most people don't want to dabble in a gaining phase if nutrition and training isn't a big priority to them. Usually like, nope, I've lost enough weight, like I'm feeling good, I know enough, I'm going to go on with the rest of my life now. Usually the gaining phase is the girls that are like, I love this shit, let's ramp it up, let's get after it. If that is you, it's really important to start to transcend that scale mentality and think there's bigger and better things at play here than weighing a certain number. If you take nothing else from this podcast, take that line. If you're someone who's wanting to build a more toned physique, really improve the look and the shape of your body, enter the gaining phase, really start to get after it in that way, really remind yourself there is far bigger and better goals than weighing a certain fucking number. That is all from me today. I feel like I've given that one a good run. I think that was maybe a little bit better than the last toning episode. Actually, I'm impressed with myself. But if you just picked up what I'm putting down and you are thinking, yep, I want to really start to build shape, build a physique, really implement all these things, obviously we have the gaining phase coming up in Eat Like Ruby. I've mentioned that in recent weeks. It is a application only capped program, meaning you have to apply and then we'll approve you. You can come in and we're capping it at that small number. I think I've mentioned this before, but the reason for that is it's very close proximity, work with me, it's personalized. Like I want to watch what you're up to and really get in on the action with you. And it's obviously hard to do that if we just open it up to the masses. So hence the application, like I said, usually this is the girls that really prioritize this stuff and want to get after it. So we have that application in place just to make sure it's the right fit for you, for us, all of the things. But if you are picking up what I'm putting down and you're thinking it is, you can apply for that now. We are starting in the middle of April. We're running right through to the end of August. That is our 18 weeks. And we are literally just going to be building awesome, wicked, lean, toned physiques. But thank you guys so much for listening today. Guys, if you are loving the podcast, please give us the reactions, the reviews, the reshares, like chuck it on your Instagram story, tag Eat Like Ruby, tag the Eat Like Ruby podcast. It's so funny because so many people message me privately, or people even like go up to Shaq in the gym and they're like, oh my God, I love Ruby. I love the podcast. I love everything she does. And no one really reaches out and lets me know. So if you are loving the podcast, please let me know, like reshare it, tag me, do all the things. I literally sit here every week and talk to myself about this stuff. So I would love to know that there's someone on the other end listening and loving it. But apart from that, guys, thank you so much. And I will be back next week.